Broadcasting from the Blanchistan Centre. This is Phoenix FM.
The internet is a communications tool used the world over where people can come together to bitch about movies and share pornography with one another.
According to the Nerd Index, you should be upside down in a junior high toilet around the clock.
This is Sparta!
All your days are belong to us.
It's a trap 9000!
Stop collecting all of us.
Leave Benny alone!
Leroy Jenkins!
Objection!
The balls are inert.
Time to
Limousine sedan.
And now it begins.
Okay, everybody, you're listening to Phoenix 92.5 FM and nerdtoknowmedia.com. My name is Darrell O'Connor, and I'm joined on the line by
Cian Calico, thrilled to be here as always.
Cian, thanks very much for rescheduling the show this week. We're a little bit off because we were supposed to do it on Thursday, but stuff happened. Bryn isn't joining us, but Bryn might pop on. So if he shows up, it's because he's joined the call. We don't know yet. But
if he shows up, it's as much a surprise to us as it is to you.
Exactly. We don't know. Hopefully he will. But he is excited about joining the next part of the show, though, Cian. Because this is like a twofer where we're going to talk about the best horror movies to talk about and then the worst next week. So he's really excited about that.
Yeah.
That's going to be a fun one. But yeah, before we get into that, man, and we do have a list of horror movies that you should check out and some of our favorite ones. But before we get into that, there is a lot of news. It's crazy news, and it all comes with all kinds of parentheses and maybes and ifs and buts. But I had to talk about this because it's me and it's Star Wars. So,
here we go. As soon as you said there's something we need to talk about, I was like, oh, is it Star Wars? Is it Star Wars? Go on. What's the news?
So basically the news is that they're, from internet sources, they're basically reshooting 75% of the movie.
Okay, so it's going to be a Justice League situation then.
We're 63 days away from the movie coming out.
Yeah, I suppose in a way that is in the Star Wars tradition, because they were editing the original Star Wars up until the day before it opened in cinemas, right?
But they weren't shooting the movie.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
We're not talking about from the intel that I'm gathering here. It's not just special effects. That's pretty normal. It's flesh and blood actors on sets that they're reshooting.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
That's so, I mean, do you have any ideas, because it sounds like you've done a bit of research on this, do you have any idea why they're doing these reshoots now?
Well, there's a few reasons on it. Doomcock, of course, covers this, so you can check out his stuff and Midnight's Edge and stuff like that. They're reporting it too. It's basically got to do with the fact that we talked a bit that they had 6 different edits of the movie,
right?
Ready to go, and apparently they test screened those, and they are all flops.
Right.
So the basic premise here is that they do not want this movie to fail, and they're trying to build it back up from the ground up, but it's not very good. And I don't know what's going to happen. Because you're thinking about it, I was in the cinema there on Friday. I went to go see Maleficent 2, which, by the short review, pointless movie, but you'll have a fun time.
Okay.
Right. There's no reason for the movie to exist. Nothing really happens, but you'll have a good time watching it.
Well, I mean, that's a bit of a promotion from the other Disney remakes, so that's certainly quite an endorsement.
Well, it's not a remake. It's just a spin-off movie with Maleficent.
Oh, I know that, but say The Lion King was pointless and pointless. So if it's fun, I'll take that.
Yeah, well, it looks great and the characters are fun and that, but there's no real point to it. So it's just one of those movies where you're like, okay, I didn't have a bad time. I enjoyed it. So yeah, anyway. But during the trailers, the Star Wars trailer came up, and it's like the same one which we've seen over and over again.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to have a trailer now tomorrow on
Really?
Monday. Yeah, during Monday Night Football in the States, and no one knows what it's going to be about. And when you think about it, at this point now, there should be at least a trailer.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been. So I think that lends a lot of credence to what we're hearing. That the reason why is because they don't even know what kind of movie it is yet.
Holy moly. It's See, I don't know how to feel about this. I still quite like the newer Star Wars, but like the original Star Wars weren't made to be crowd pleasers. They eat that. I mean, the prequels kind of speak to that, but like they were sort of they were kind of made, and they just happened to catch people's imagination. I feel like making a crowd pleaser Star Wars is a bit of a contradiction in terms, and that seems to be what they're kind of doing.
Well, it's just because they really need to make a movie that won't flop. And they're really afraid that this is going to flop, and it probably will. This is probably going to flop to the moon. But
I think if they are reshooting it, which reshoots are expensive, if they are, they may have just, even whatever the movie's success, like Justice League, reached the point that they couldn't possibly make their money back.
well, that's what happened with Solo. So Solo was not bad.
Oh yeah,
Solo was not a bad film. I actually really quite enjoyed Solo, but they spent so much money reshooting it that it lost money, and nobody also had any interest in it. So. Look, to be honest with you, the best thing to do is just go with what they have and hope for the best. But this is not a movie that people want to see. There's no appetite for it. There's no excitement. It's just it sucks because it's like it's a Star Wars movie and everyone just wants it to be over and done with. Sorry, go on.
No, you go. Sorry. It feels like it's like a studio's like end of year college term paper or something.
Yeah.
It feels like they kind of have to do it, and they're not mad about it, but they will get it done on time begrudgingly. That's the vibe that's coming from the bits and pieces I've seen, and indeed from yourself talking about going to see it, you know?
Yeah, and it's like I have a Cineworld card, so I'll go see it anyway. I'm not too pushed. I'm not excited. I'm just kind of like, oh my god, just please, just put this to bed because it's it's terrible. But look, it's one of those movies where I can't wait for it to be done, and I think either way it's going to be one of those tadpole movies where you're like, this is how to fail, look at this. And that's kind of where I'm at with it, but look, Doomcock is probably going to give more details on it when it happens, so we'll just have to see. Midnight's Edge is great for this. So if you guys want to check out more, go to Midnight's Edge, and we'll obviously jump on it because we just can't help talking about the failure of Star Wars.
It's funny actually, because just talking about the Maleficent film, I saw the Disney Sleeping Beauty for the first time, the original now, a few weeks ago, and I was getting a big, Emperor Palpatine vibe off that Maleficent character. Like, I'm guessing Angelina Jolie has fun in the role, does she?
Oh yeah, no, she's pretty scary when you watch her, like because you're sitting there going, "Oh Jesus, what's this?" Like, to be fair, it's just whatever way her cheekbones are, it just looks super weird, and it's like, "Oh my God, what's this?" But it's a fun little movie, I did not enjoy it. Did not hate it. I actually quite enjoyed it. I didn't think I'd enjoy it. It's very slow, but then it's just kind of fun, It's inoffensive. Just a silly little movie. That's not too.
Well, funnily enough, that's what I've heard about the first one as well. Like, I'm a huge fan of the YouTuber Lindsay Ellis, and she consistently refers to Maleficent as like one of her favorite movies, and also calls it my trash. So that seems to be the relationship between the fans and that franchise. Like,
I fully believe it. Now, I didn't see the first one, and you don't have to, because nothing happens. It's a pointless movie, but it's a fun pointless movie. It's not offensive. It's just a fun little movie where you sit there, you buy your popcorn, you sit and enjoy. I know we saw it in the IMAX because it's just how we were able to see it, and did not feel offended or upset. Quite the opposite. So fair play, Disney. It was kind of like a throwback to the old kind of Disney live action films. I was putting together a chair the other day, and we saw 101 Dalmatians 2 was on the TV. Was on.
Oh, I saw that in cinemas back in the day. Yeah,
it was on RT2, on Saturday, and I'm like, wow, this is absolute garbage. But it's traditional Disney garbage, where they'd make just really weird choices in a live action movie, but then their animation would always be great. And Maleficent is kind of that throwback to it, but they have a budget and obviously big CGI.
Yeah,
stuff, but...
You're right. There is actually quite a lot of similarities, like Glenn Close and Angelina Jolie. There's one big name actor in it, probably has a lot of creative control over the film, maybe too much.
For sure.
And it's messy, but they're having fun, and so are you, so why not?
Yeah, exactly. And that's that's what you want,
Mm.
But one thing I just saw there, someone popped up on the Expanded Universe Preservation Society. Someone did a review of Death Troopers. I don't know if you've ever read the book Death Troopers.
No, I haven't. No. Is this what era of Star Wars is this from now?
This is Expanded Universe, so it's not
Okay.
canon anymore.
Right.
But it takes place on an Imperial barge that's overrun with zombies. So it's zombie stormtroopers. All right.
Zombie stormtroopers.
All right, and Han Solo and Chewbacca show up halfway through it. It's actually a very, very good book. I'd 100% recommend it. It's a fun little novel. It's from a couple of years ago now, but it works super well.
Who's the author?
Let's see. It's been a while since I read it. So just let me double check.
Oh, sorry. If you don't have it to hand.
Oh, it's Joe Scriber.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is he like a consistent Star Wars person, or is this like a first offering? Or
No, he's consistent enough now. He wrote a follow-up to it called Red Harvest, which wasn't that great, but also about zombies. But to be fair, it does kind of tie up to the actual Death Troopers that are canon now, because apparently Death Troopers that are canon now are zombies. They're undead Imperial Death Troopers. So basically, yeah, that's what they're kind of. That's what the theory is, that they're actually zombies. But
yeah,
one of the best things about current Disney is the design of Death Troopers. But this was way before it. This was written in 2009. So not definitely worth your time if you're a fan of that kind of stuff, and you like. You're looking for something a bit kind of spooky to read in the Star Wars world. Give that a read.
I like zombies. I'll go for that.
Yeah, go for that. I think you'll really enjoy it. Red Harvest is not as good, but it's still kind of fun. So I'd recommend Death Troopers anyway, man. I think you really enjoy it.
Awesome.
Okay, so let's kind of switch gears here. Now, the plan for this is, because it's Halloween in 2 weeks. Next week we're going to do our big kind of our follow-up to this. So we're going to talk about the best horror movies, and then I'm going to throw in some horror video games as well. Bryn is
nice. I didn't even think of that.
Oh, well, if you have any to throw in, you might as well.
I'm adding as we speak. Yeah.
Sweet. And Bryn is very excited about the follow-up to this next week, which is going to be The Bad. So he's very excited. He has a big list, and obviously, if Bryn jumps in, he'll obviously throw in as well. But yeah, we're gonna go back and forward with this. So, like, I think every year it's great. Halloween is fantastic because you can kind of reflect on the horror movies, and it's a big kind of horror time to shine, right? It's one of those great things. It's why I love it. And there's so many great movies to watch. So many there, and now particularly with Netflix and all that kind of stuff, you can watch a bunch of trash. So I've kind of gone through stuff. I didn't want to watch, recommend trash because I didn't want to recommend trash, And by the way, there's a great channel on YouTube that I had to bring up. It's called Inside a Mind. It's super fun. It talks about some really, really strange stuff. Cults and weird TV shows. And there's, I didn't even know about, like, there was one on when Inside Number 9, the TV show, they did a live show of it in a haunted.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. Awesome.
Have you seen Inside Number 9?
I've seen all the series on Netflix, but I haven't seen that special yet.
Inside Number 9 is one of the best shows for anyone who likes Black Mirror, but likes all Black Mirror. It's like a British Black Mirror in the sense of, like, it stayed consistently British. And it's done by the guys who did The League of Gentlemen.
Yeah.
And I love that show. It's great. But they did a special in the Haunted Granada Studios, right? And the setup was that they were just doing a normal episode, and then all the sound cut out. And people thought that was just a mess up, but actually, the way they shot it, it turned into, like, the ghosts were haunting the studio during the live show. So it's I haven't seen the special, but Inside a Mind, went through it, and there's some really, really cool stuff. So straight off the bat, honorable mention from YouTube channels for something like that. Inside a Mind is great to kind of talk about that stuff, but there's so many YouTube channels we can talk about that'd be serious in and of itself, which we might revisit at some point. But or obviously just wanted to bring that up. So I'm going to kick things off here, Kane, with So what I'll do one movie, one game. All right,
Okay.
we'll do 10 each. So the first one, well, we're obviously making up for Bryn not being here. So the first one I'm going to mention is a relatively recent one, and it's Sinister.
Okay.
So
I've seen Sinister. What's the appeal for you?
well, I'm not talking about the sequel because the sequel, it is what it is, and it's not very good. But what I like about Sinister was how different it was, right? It's one of the most atmosphere-soaked movies in recent years, and something that really could have started off a great franchise rather than what happened to it. For anyone who doesn't know, this crime author moves into a new house, and then he's basically trying to chase up this case of murders, and he's trying to win back his prestige as a famous author, despite what his family thinks.
Right.
He discovers these tapes or these kind of like that, these films of different murders. He tries to uncover what they are, and turns out it's a demon that takes the souls of children by getting them to kill their whole family.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's a very dark movie, but it's a very, very interesting, unique movie that's unlike anything I've seen in recent years, and it's only 2012, so it's not that old. But if you haven't seen it, it's definitely a good movie to kind of get yourself in the mood. It's better than Insidious, but it plays on a lot of the similar kind of themes.
So, like, this is part of the Ethan Hawke's kind of return to Hollywood, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, this was his first real kind of stab at making a return. So it was around the same time as he was in The Purge, and a few like that. But Sinister is a much better flick. Sorry, don't let the score IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes throw you off, because it's genuinely a really good movie.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I think I haven't seen that one, unfortunately. I'm thinking of a different recent horror movie with Ethan Hawke beginning with S. I'm scratching my head to think of what it is. So yeah, tell me more about Sinister without giving it away then. Is it like a jump scare, or is it like
It has one or two
what kind of
has one or two jump scares in it, but it's not a jump scare movie.
Okay.
But the thing of what's interesting about it is like the actual films that they show, you're watching them with Ethan Hawke.
Right.
So it's one of those movies where you're sitting there going, okay, I can kind of get into this, and it has a lot of atmosphere. So it's not one of those movies where you're expected to a lot of assumed knowledge. You're learning at the same time.
Yeah.
There's one or two jump scares because it's a creepy kid movie, right? So there's creepy kids in it, but it's not cheap. The jump scares
Right.
aren't cheap. It's a well constructed movie. So if you're looking for something like that, you could do a hell of a lot worse, and there are a hell of a lot of movies worse. And believe it or not, the sequel actually the sequel does that. But it's one of those movies that where you're sitting there going, oh my god, I can't believe they went for it, because it starts off with a family being hung.
Jesus.
And it doesn't cut away from it. It's a graphic opening to the movie. There's no sound, so it's even more spooky. But yeah, it has one of the best opening for horror movies. Like straight off the bat, it's like, yeah, this is something else. So that's my first pick from a film standpoint. From the game standpoint, let's start off nice and easy. The first Slender, the 8 pages, or Slender, the Arrival. Have you ever played those games?
I've got to say, I actually haven't played a lot of horror games, but I'd love to hear about them. What makes this one tick?
Sure. Well, the 8 pages is one of the most famous games, flash games or whatever, from recent years. So 2012 is when it came out again. Survival horror game. You're basically just walking around the forest trying to collect pages, and then Slenderman shows up and messes things up. Obviously, Slenderman is, was, the big bad of the internet for a very long time, and it was released for free. I remember you could download it and play it.
Oh, I see. The 8 pages is a Slenderman game.
Yes.
Oh, yes, I have played that. Yes, up to speed with you now. Yeah.
It's the Slenderman game.
Yes.
And then it was re-released as Slender, the Arrival, which I bought, and it's actually a fantastic first-person game. So that level's inside it, but again, has so much atmosphere to it. If you haven't played it, definitely do check it out. It's it does get me. It is quite scary.
It's quite
It is quite
simple
scary.
because for anyone who hasn't played it, you basically have to walk around this forest finding 8 pages,
Yeah,
all of which are randomly scattered around,
yeah,
and the Slenderman's coming for you. And what could you say about him?
yeah, and that's carried on into the wider game. The
Mm.
wider game also has that kind of thing where you have to collect certain things, but you know, in the actual game itself, there's a part where you go into a house, and the house is just covered in Slenderman children drawings,
Yeah.
and it's absolutely terrifying. So you know, if you haven't played it and you're looking for a good survival horror experience, start off with Slender, either the 8 pages because it's free, or Slender the Arrival. I think you can get it. It's across platforms, but you can get it now on PS3, sorry, PS4 for like €4 or something like that. So definitely something to worth getting.
And before we go off it, though, what do you think makes the game scary?
It's effective survival horror. Like, you don't have any weapons. You're literally just completely disarmed.
Mm.
You know, it's not one of those things where you can, you
Mm.
know, fight your way out or something like that. You're like, no, if you don't manage to complete the objective or get away from Slenderman, that's it. It's game over. And also, as well, like, you know, there's certain things like the screen starts tearing. You know, it's just
Oh, I used to hate that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and just you know it's coming. You know, there's
Mm.
nothing you can do about it. So it's the fact that it really does kind of have that sense of helplessness, which
Mm.
is a very hard thing to do. But once they get it, it's brilliant. And this is one of those games that, oh my, it's free to play game made with Unity as well. So it's like,
Yeah.
come on, it's better than a lot of other games which you've seen. So yeah, definitely that's my first pick.
Yeah, that's lovely when like these like small, low budget, like good idea things just really take off. You know, you don't see that happening often in movies, let alone games. Like,
For sure, that's because people are too busy trying to get the cheap jump scare, and there's certain games like this one called Emily Wants to Play, and that's not a very good game, but it is just no, seriously, it's not a good game, but it does have jump scares and it's pretty damn scary. And also, Welcome to the Game, which is a game about the dark web, where you go
Mm.
on the dark web and then serial killers try to come get you. It's a very stupid
Yeah.
game, but that they solely rely on jump scares to get it, and they work because it's a jump scare. It's going to scare you, but it's not.
Yeah.
Doesn't have the same kind of like, ooh, that was earned. That was an earned jump scare, and that's the difference.
Yeah, I think that's really kind of either in games or in movies or TV. That is the make of everything. It's the jump scare is meaningless if there isn't a really good atmosphere to it, you know?
Correct. Like, what's the point? It's like,
Mm.
you might have scared me, but it wasn't earned, and then you're just gonna.
Yeah.
So, anyway, what about you, man? What have you got? What have you got coming up?
Okay, I've been quietly adding to my list there. So I don't know games are involved. I'll do a two for straight away, which is Alien the movie and
Oh,
Alien Isolation the game, because
nice.
they're kind of both extensions of the other. Obviously, what more can you say about Alien? It still scares me to this day. I love the hour of build up of like just landing on the planet and like the gradual walking around. Obviously, the prequels explained it a bit, walking around the creepy ship and like the gradual. Oh, it gets me every single time. I used to have a PSP and like those like little mini discs, and I used to watch Alien every single day. And like, there's only one or two jump scares,
Every
but it's
day.
still. Oh yeah,
Wow,
like,
man.
okay, I had a few, so I'd skip around between that, Aliens, and Hellboy, and that kind of stuff. But I watched
Okay.
it a lot. I was
Wow.
big into that because it was just so mysterious, and like you said, it had the sense of helplessness about the creature as well.
Well, that's it. That's the important thing, that like, if that's missing from horror in general,
Mm.
it's pointless, because that is like what makes horror.
Yeah,
Right? The fact that, and it's something uniquely Japanese. It's what we're going to be talking about in our panel. That's something that has been borrowed directly from the Japanese model. That
but
absolute,
the lack
yeah.
of explanations, like,
No,
or,
the helplessness.
mm,
Like it's like it's almost a cosmic terror where you're kind of
mm,
you're on your own, and that's it. And there's nothing you can really do. They can't fight it. If you run, yeah, you might run, but
yeah,
it's going to come after you. And that's one thing that 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 game and the movie actually specifically tackled. So yeah, Alien Isolation. I haven't finished it. I have really enjoyed it though. I've really enjoyed what I've played so far. But yeah,
Yeah,
man.
let's talk about Isolation for a sec then, because I haven't finished it either.
Right.
I got freaked out when, I'm not sure if this is true, but someone told me that if you've got the Xbox One extension thing in, that the game can hear you talking in the room or shuffling around or all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It's a really well crafted game in that obviously we talked about the helplessness a bit, but even little things like saving takes about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And if you're being chased by it, like what are you supposed to do, you know? So
30
it
seconds.
really makes you second guess yourself, you know?
Yeah, 30 seconds is a long time when you're being chased. You know. And like it's one of those things where you're like, oh no, that is not near. No, seriously,
Yeah.
when that thing is coming for you, you better move. You know.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic game. It really is. I haven't gone back to it because I just haven't really had the time yet. But I think I might play it a little bit going in because it's a very good kind of comparison from how the Western game has taken over Japanese approach. So that's something that I might do. Thanks, Kane.
No worries. Actually, before we move on to your next recommendation, like, what do you think are the fundamental differences in brief between like the Western and Eastern sort of horror things? Like, what are the tropes?
Well, we're going to be talking about that for an hour now in a couple of weeks.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, so we don't want to give
but
it
like
all.
broadly speaking,
we don't want to give it all away.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Just 'cause
yeah, but broadly speaking, though, it would be how horror is like to boil it all down. It's how horror is dictated, right? So what scares us, Western Irish people, wouldn't be the same as what scares someone in Japan, like a Japanese person, right? Wouldn't be what scares someone in China. Wouldn't be what scares someone even in the Middle East, right? Because what scares us is culturally ingrained, is culturally dictated, either biologically or just through society or whatever, because we have biological memories of these things are all different, right? So that's how our horror is disseminated, right? And like the actual experience of it. So how Japanese horror dictate what difference is based on that, but to boil it down, it's the jump scare phenomenon that hits us, right? Where you're sitting in a horror movie and you're like, okay, jump scare now, jump scare now, jump scare now.
Yeah.
And you can almost kind of dictate where it's coming from, right?
Yeah.
You bang on The Ring, and this is why this was such a big thing when this kind of hit, around the time that Ringu really picked off and then they remade it. It was because that was completely different to our experience, right? Like you're watching Ringu and it scares the hell out of you because you don't know what's going to happen. It's completely different. That's kind of the main difference to boil it down. Now, obviously, we're going to go into this more, and it's going to be something that we will be talking about in great detail. But that's it. That's why it's more scary. If you hate jump scares, and it doesn't scare you, you'll switch into one of these Japanese films, and it will scare the hell out of you because it takes you completely off guard. You're completely shocked by how this is done differently. Well, we've seen it kind of change now where we're adopting it. Obviously, Alien Isolation is one of them, but that's happening in games. In movies, they're still going jump scares because it's a cheap and easy way to do it. But in games, we're really seeing it that way, where that style is starting to come in. So the helpless, lost person who's very underpowered going against this unstoppable force. That's something that's uniquely Japanese. And it's kind of where it leads into games like the next game I'm going to talk about.
I think that's as good a segue as ever there was one.
Yeah, the next game I'm going to talk about that really kind of does that is it's kind of hard to sum it up because there's so many. But Fatal Frame 2.
Okay.
Fatal Frame 2 is probably the best one. Fatal Frame 2 is a game based on Japanese folk horror. And this is what I mean. Like, this specific kind of way of doing things is folk. And folk is something that can't be learned. It's something that can't be reasoned with. It's in you, right? It's like the way the Banshee follows people with O in the name. So, you and me, Keen, we're screwed.
Oh yeah, we're stuck
We're
totally.
screwed. Like,
Bryn too, as well. Now I think
Bryn
about
as
it,
well, yeah.
this is we
Now,
just need to quarantine this podcast.
now, to be fair, I'm not to go too much into it, but I've heard the Banshee, right? So, it's one of those things
How
where
can you say that and not go into it though?
because I'd be here all night. I'll never forget. I'll never forget my experience of that. And it was the most terrifying thing I've ever heard in my life. And it was one of those things. But this is just in people. People from all around the world have these things that are uniquely that. And when games pull from that and it's successful, it's amazing. And this is and it can be exported and can scare people in whole new ways. Something that I'm shocked that there hasn't been a good Irish horror game. I really am. I just don't know why there isn't. Like, there's so much to pull from, but
Oh, there's plenty to scare us, totally.
exactly, it is what it is, But this the Fatal Frame basically is a long running game. It's still running. I think there's one out for the Wii U. And I'm probably going to buy a Wii U solely for it. But it's in the same kind of vein as Silent Hill in its kind of world building. But basically, it's supernatural photography, right? So it's based on a domestic space. So it's kind of following that eerie found footage Japanese style from 2005. But you're basically trying to boil it down, you're capturing pictures of ghosts while trying to solve puzzles. And that's what you do.
Okay.
So you're not being attacked, you're not being hunted. It's just this really eerie kind of atmosphere where you only have a camera. And that's the only way you can see these ghosts to find out what's going on. Like, you can't do anything else except for take pictures and try to find your way out of wherever you are, right? Fatal Frame 2 is probably the best one and the easiest one to get into. Fatal Frame 3, some people like a bit more, but I found, if that intrigues you, if you want something a bit more recent, there's a game called Dreadout from Taiwan. I think it's Indonesia or Taiwan, I can't remember. And similar kind of idea, but you play as a schoolgirl in an old school, and you're walking around with your phone.
Okay, so it's
Same
like
kind of
not
thing.
interacting. Like, this isn't like a third person type thing, is it? Or
No,
like...
it is. It's all third person. Yeah, but
okay.
you go into first person as well if needed.
Okay.
So
it's basically sort of in like trying to see things beyond our usual vision. That's kind of the theme, is it?
yeah, well, you're experiencing it through technology rather than your whatever way you're going to do it. But again, it is that sense of the unknown. It is that sense of you're almost at the mercy of these otherworldly beings, and if it wasn't for your camera or your phone or whatever, you're kind of freaked out. So with that in mind, it's one of those spectacular little games, and I'd really recommend if anyone's fond of that. I don't think Fatal Frame's on Steam, but Dreadout definitely is. So tacit recommendation for them to be interchangeable. Seriously, like, they're super fun. I play Dreadout a lot because it's so good, so good.
And I think you've hit on something there, because really good horror responds to like things like ideas in our cultural society now and that kind of stuff. And like, I haven't seen a good smartphone horror yet.
Well, they've tried.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, nothing up to speed like that.
Yeah, they've
Sorry,
tried.
go on there.
They've tried, but it's always very gimmicky. Like, I thought what Unfriended was quite good. And the first one, thought that was a really fun idea. And that was all through like Skype, like a Skype call and stuff. But we're not there yet, because actually there's a movie coming out. I saw a trailer for it the other day. It's called what's it called? I can't remember the name of it. But basically the premise is an app that kills people. Right. And
okay.
I can't remember the name of it now. Countdown. I think it's called Countdown. And it looks terrible. So I don't think we're going to get one of those movies just yet, Kane. But look, at least with games we have a good idea, and maybe Japan will lead the way. But The Ring, there we go. That's my next kind of The Ring did kind of touch on those themes in 2002. Ringu, obviously, a couple of years beforehand, but that touched on technology where there's haunting through technology. Now, it wasn't through phones, obviously, but it was through the TV. So Similar kind of setup, similar kind of idea, but definitely Ring is my next. Ring, Dreadout, and Fatal Frame are my next picks. What about you, man?
Well, actually, I was going to say before we move on, Ring is like, to go more abstract, the concept behind it is once you kind of hear about it and hear the 7 days, like, and then the word getting out from there and more people. So in the most traditional sense, there is an aspect of an idea like a meme in the horror of Ring, isn't there? It's like kind of trying to suppress this thing that's out in the world in our minds, but obviously you can't do that. Like,
exactly, and it's disseminated through technology.
Well, since we're on technology, then I'm not sure if we'd call it horror in the conventional sense, but I'm going to go to one of the films I've seen more than any other. It's Cloverfield, the original one.
Oh, very good. Good choice.
I love it to bits. It's actually, like, I know the gimmick is that it's all done through a camera, a bit like, I suppose, the games you're talking about. It's actually really well put together if you go back to it. It's directed by, I think, it's written by Drew Goddard, who did Cabin in the Woods. It's directed by the director of the Planet of the Apes prequels in the last few years, and it's just a really slick, well put together horror film. Like, the 5 characters are great. You just get very quickly who they are and what they want. It's very simple premise. They're just wandering around New York trying to find one of the characters who's stuck in a building, and you just get kind of like Jaws in that way. You just get fleeting glimpses of the monster now and again. And I'm not mad about the most recent Cloverfield film, but I don't know. I just love it to bits. I think it's a really clever premise. Have you ever seen it?
I have. I went to go see it when it came out in the cinema, in Screen 17 in Cineworld, and I just remember going, wow, this is incredible. I kind of had everything that, wasn't in at the time. Found footage movies were still a thing, but nothing that was, hit on those cylinders. So yeah, man, like, if anyone hasn't seen it, go out your way to see it.
I think it might be on Netflix at the moment. I wouldn't swear on it, but I know that at least a couple of the Cloverfields are up there.
It's not hard to find anyway.
No.
It's not like you can buy the DVD for a couple of euro, but definitely, if your only experience with it is those most recent movies, don't bother. It's not a good representation.
Yeah, and like, you don't get to see much of it, but I really like the design of the monster. It's hard to do a good movie monster these days, but it's really creepy. It's like slightly, I know I'm giving away things, but it's like slightly spiderish, slightly dinosaurish, slightly alien. There's like, it's a weird mix of things that looks great. And it's just, I can't really think of another monster that looks quite like it,
Yeah, you don't get to see much of it, obviously, but what you do get to see really leaves interpretation, and there's some really cool pictures online of what this monster looks like. It's very spooky, but very cool.
Yeah, I'm really glad it didn't get like a Prometheus style. Like, I mean, I know the third Cloverfield wasn't great, but I'm glad there wasn't like a prequel that explained where the monster came from and like what its name is and what it wants and all that kind of stuff. I'm quite happy knowing less about it.
Well, to be fair, a lot of those prequels weren't actually Cloverfield movies. They were just movies that had nowhere else to go.
But I quite like that. I wouldn't because I quite like the second Cloverfield film, the Cloverfield Lane.
Yeah, I thought it was really good.
And it's a film no one would have seen were it not for someone putting Cloverfield on it. Now, obviously, the reverse is true of the third one, if you can call it a third one. But I think as a premise for a horror series, just kind of linking them together, I like that. I think promote more movies than would otherwise get seen.
Yeah, fair, man. Fair. That's a strong recommendation as you can give.
Yeah, I'm very aware that I rant on about that one for 5 minutes. So give me your next two there. I've only got a few games, unfortunately, so I'm gonna thin them out.
No worries. Next one, I'm gonna jump back to the 70s. 70s.
Okay.
70s is the era for horror movies, guys. Listen, if you're sitting here going, horror movies are so bad, and I haven't seen a good one, get yourself the means to watch horror movies from the 70s, because they will mess you up. I remember when I got like super into horror movies, I was like, oh man, the 70s is weird, and it's weird because you're kind of watching them and the way they're shot looks a bit different. But some honorable mentions here. You got Phantasmia, The Brood, House on the Left. Sorry, Last House on the Left. Alice, Sweet Alice, which is still messed up. Let Me Tell House. And we're not even, we're just kind of talking about these, the big one here to talk about, and you kind of have to. It's the biggie. It's The Exorcist from
I was hoping you'd say that. Yeah,
1973. Like, I know people are like, oh, it's not that scary. Yes, it is.
yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The Exorcist one is like, oh man, it's still one of those movies where, you watch it at like 4 in the day, and then a few comedies after it, so you don't.
Yeah.
It messes with you. I remember I watched it when I was a kid. I was like 8 or 9, and should not have watched that movie or 8 or 9 because it messed with me quite severely. Not the best in the series, as far as a movie. Like, my personal favorite is Exorcist 3.
I've heard a lot of people saying good things about that in the past few weeks.
Have you not seen Exorcist 3?
I haven't seen The Exorcist 1.
Oh my god, dude. You have to. You really have to. Like, it's one of those movies that you kind of have to see. Watch The Exorcist 1. Do not watch the second one. Do not watch any of the other ones.
I've seen clips of the second one with Pazuzu and James Earl Jones and all that malarkey. Yeah.
That's just garbage. But no, do watch the first one anyway. The first one's fantastic. And then watch the third one. The third one, written by Blatty, as well. So it's like a kind of a crime movie with an exorcism in it. It's good. Yeah, no, it's
that's quite a tagline, isn't it?
Well, that's what it is. It's based in this mental hospital, and so much atmosphere. Like, you don't see any violence in it at all. But it's about a serial killer, and it's just has some really messed up kind of shots in it, and really sticks with you. Like, religious horror is the thing that freaks me out more than anything. Like, I can watch someone being hacked to death in movies, serial killer, blah, blah. Religious horror is what freaks me out. So they're the movies that kind of get me.
And why do you think that is?
I'm Catholic. As I said to you, we're like, we are a Catholic country, right? So it's ingrained in us to be scared of certain things. And that's what it's just what I'm saying to you. All this stuff, even if we don't think about it, even if you're not a Catholic or not religious or whatever, that's still going to be in you because it's who you are, right? And this whole stuff comes from a Catholic American mindset, and that's what it plays on, and it works super well. That's kind of the Irish persuasion, right? And the American persuasion is as well, where you're going to be freaked out by certain things, and particularly a lot of the iconography in the third one really just hits that button and just hits it, and then just keeps going at it, and that's it. It really freaks you out. But obviously, some people will be different. But for me in particular, it's just certain things in the movie just mess you up.
I think you're right though, because like if you're talking to religious fears and that kind of stuff, I mean, what is it like? Possession in particular, because I was raised Catholic too, obviously, like, but it's it's I mean, of course, because we're here, but and there is this kind of, I don't have any bad blood with the church personally. I was going to Christian unions well late into my life, but there was this thing where like this slight suggestion that you could be doing something bad in your life and not even know it. There's that sense that, oh, you got to be careful, the evil might be in you, and that's what what an exorcism and a possession is essentially. You could have a devil in you, not know it, and that feeds into that. So I think you're right. I think those exorcist films really play on that deep-seated religious insecurity.
Yeah, well, it's more a case of it's like there's nothing you can do about it. Like, where I always saw it wasn't based on that, because I don't really have any bad blood against church at all. I don't really care. It's not really a thing that I think about, but it's more just a sense of if there's a serial killer, you can kind of kill that person.
Yeah.
Person, right? If it's someone like Freddy and Jason, well, you have a bit of a chance. Not much of a chance, but a bit of a. If it's the devil or a demon, you don't really. You're kind of
And
screwed.
yeah, and like
that's
you
what,
said,
yeah,
it's leaning into the unknown again, isn't it?
yeah,
Because you don't know
exactly.
what it
'Cause
is.
you don't
Like,
know
yeah.
yeah, you can't really do anything about it. So that's where that comes from, and that's what kind of taps into it. Now,
Hmm.
my next pick is going to tie directly back into that. But before we get into that, my next game pick is going to be oh, it's hard. It's hard. Okay, it's gonna.
Hmm.
Let's see. Oh, I want to make this count. Right. Because there's so many. There's so many. We're gonna go with the Haunted Ground, right, from 2005. Haunted.
Okay, proper old school. What kind of platform is this game on?
Well, this is PS2. PS2 is the platform to pick for horror games, my friends. If you're looking for horror gaming,
Okay.
PS2 is where it's at. Yeah, this is just a very, very unassuming game. It's not graphically violent. It's not brutally. It's just a survival horror game where you wake up in a castle after being in a car accident and you're trying to find what's going on.
Mm. Okay.
Japanese horror game has some really messed up elements in it, drenched in atmosphere,
Hmm.
and it kind of plays. If you're a Silent Hill fan, it kind of plays like that mixed with Resident Evil, but without all the silliness.
Mm.
So yeah, definitely, and also there's a cool doggo in it as well, so you have a good time. But yeah, definitely one of those games to check out. What's your next pick?
Oh my god! Sorry, I'm still laughing. I gotta know what kind of doggo.
He's like a little husky. So you can't go wrong with that.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, we had a bit of technical difficulties there. Yeah, okay. Well, then I'll just go to my little list. Well, since you've mentioned kind of haunted house, I'm going to actually mention a recent one, The Haunting of Hill House, which is
Ooh,
the
good
most recent thing that actually gave me proper nightmares. I haven't had that in a while now. Have you seen it yourself?
Is it the Broken Neck Lady episode?
Yeah, basically.
Oh man, yeah. That, like, now for anyone who doesn't know, that movie, like the actual not movie, it's a TV show on Netflix.
It's an 8-episode thing on Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is a fairly old idea. Like, it's been around. That movie, The Haunting, from 2001. That's actually what it, like, closer to the book than the TV show. The TV show kind of goes in its own way, but I found the TV show to be a lot more terrifying than The Haunting, because The Haunting turned into a bit of a meme. But yeah,
Like I think, and The Haunting, the 2001 was like a remake of The Haunting of Hill House, the movie from the 40s. Like, it's one of those proper, like,
old
ancestry horrors. Like,
yeah, exactly. And it's it like the show itself is good, but that particular episode is absolutely terrifying.
It's, I mean, for anyone who hasn't like seen it, basically the hook of it, to not spoil like an 8-episode series, is that there's a big house they used to, this family of 5 kids and the parents used to live in.
Yeah, and basically the family, like, they buy houses and renovate them and sell them.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. And the mother dies in mysterious circumstances, and as the kids have grown up, they've kind of fallen out over whether they believe the house did it or whether they believe that the dad might have murdered her. And if the first couple of episodes kind of investigate their characters in building up to them all coming back together for a funeral, and it's just, the atmosphere is so good. It's just, you were talking about the Bent Neck Lady episode, like that is, like, they do jump scares, but that's the scariest stuff. It lures you in with some character stuff and then uses the ghosts as like an extension of that. It's really, really chilling. I still get shivers thinking about some of the things in there.
Exactly. It's just hits you right in the gut after those kind of movies, and you're just after those kind of like slow elements, and it's slow, but it's not, it's fantastic. My next pick.
Before we move off that, actually, no. Actually, before we move off Haunting of Hill House, I will say it reins in the jump scares, but it does one in episode 7, and it's my favorite jump scare of all time.
Right, go on, I mean, we're gonna pull up. spoiler warning, but go on.
mild spoiler. I won't give away who's and what's and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of it is just character drama.
Yeah.
And there's one scene where two people are just chatting in a car. It sort of spoils into an argument, and you think it's all this, that, and then something jumps out from the back seat of the car and drives them off the road.
Yeah,
and I dropped my earphones. I couldn't. And then it plays back into the drama. So it's a very well balanced horror show. I would recommend it wholeheartedly. Don't watch the Bent Neck Lady episode before you go to sleep like I did. But,
no, that's probably a bad idea. That's probably a bad idea.
Probably. But now I know. Yeah. Sorry, you go on to your next pick there.
Next pick is going to be another. Sorry, I've said it links in to. It's Hereditary.
Oh yes, I wanted to see that. Is it good?
Yes, it's phenomenal. But this and I've noticed this now with a lot of more recent horror movies. They are kind of leaning back to the 70s. In their kind of style and approach, and Hereditary is like, about as 70s as it can get. And the setup is that this grandmother dies, and they weren't really close, and the family's kind of dealing with it. However, the grandmother turns out to be leader of a satanic cult, and
as you do,
and she's trying to get her family into it, basically, and that's kind of what it is. It is genuinely very, very scary. It has some really messed up moments where you're sitting there going, what am I watching? This is absolutely crazy. Yeah. I am terrified. And yeah, you can't go wrong with it. You really can't. It's if you haven't seen it, make it your business to watch Hereditary. Fantastic film.
What makes it stand out? Because there has been a fair few good horror movies the past 2 or 3 years. What makes it stand out in particular?
It's just so good. It's just so good. Like, the story is great. That's what it is. After you finish watching it, there are scenes that just stick with you. Right? Like, you're watching it and you're like, I am profoundly changed by that movie. And,
wow, that is high praise.
And you can't say that from a lot of movies. It's like when you watch The Exorcist, you're profoundly changed by it. And not many movies have that impact. So, that's all I can say. We can maybe watch it, Keen, maybe, and then we can talk about it in more detail with all the spoiler warnings and stuff. But definitely, if you take something away from today, watch that movie. It's really is something else. A quick little.
So, should I do Exorcist first, or what order should I watch these in?
Definitely watch The Exorcist first, because The Exorcist, kind of is the granddaddy of these movies. So watch that first, and then watch Hereditary. And The Exorcist 3 is just a fun movie to watch in general. A video game recommendation, just to kind of tie this off, would be System Shock 2. Not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily a horror game per se, but it does kind of tie into that kind of horror aesthetic, and does have some really messed up moments in it. It's kind of like BioShock in a sense. Obviously, it's Kemp first. It's the granddaddy of that movie. Oh, sorry, of that video game series. But definitely one to play. And if you haven't had a chance to play it, do. System Shock 2, definitely fantastic.
Wow. And what's kind of the plot of it then?
The plot is you are a hacker in the future, and you wake up on this ship called the Von Braun, and everything has gone to hell. So you're trying to find out what's going on, but you're being helped by this rogue AI called Shodan, who thinks she's a god. And that's the setup. So you're kind of going through trying to upgrade yourself and find your way what's going on, and it really is a lot of fun. But it's not necessarily the scariest parts, but does have some bits where you're like, oh my god, what's this? So super fun.
That's excellent. Can I just ask you, where do you get the recommendations about these horror games, or did you grow up with them? Like, what's your source?
A bit of both. I just kind of played them, like when it's kind of weird. That's hard. I never thought about that before. A few I grew up with, and a few then I just kind of went down and kind of explored to see what would work. So it's like everything, you could Google and you're like, what's good? And then you just kind of experience them, and then you make time. So with the games and stuff, I used to, I've been reviewing games for about 8, 9 years. So yeah, I just kind of played everything that I could, anything that was good. And then with movies, yeah, man, just either buying DVDs or some other way, I just kind of made it my business to see as much as I can.
Yeah. Well, fair play. You're proving yourself quite the quite the expert this episode.
Cheers, man. Well, what's your next picks?
I'm kind of torn between a couple. I'll go with another one of my old favorites because, shamefully, we've only had a limited amount of zombies on this episode, not including the Death Troopers.
Yes.
So I'm going to throw a shout out for 28 Days Later, another one of my PSP ultimate rewatch over and over again every single day picks.
Ooh, very fun. 28 Days Later is great. Great movie.
That's fun isn't the word I'd use, but I'm pretty sure it invented the fast zombie. That's like a trope now, but like I think it might have been the first.
I think it did, yeah.
And it does what I think, because I'm trying to kind of keep track of the horrors we're talking about, and it gets character right. And if character in horror isn't done first and done well, then there's nothing to latch onto. Like it's
nothing
just
nothing else matters.
Yeah, like you could have the best monster in the world, but if you aren't concerned for the people in it, then who cares? And like Cillian Murphy and like Brendan Gleeson and I'm trying to remember the actress name. I think Naomi Harris. Like it's great to see this little family of people just come together from like, and it has one of the best horror openings as well, because it just wakes up with him completely naked in a hospital bed, wandering around a deserted London. Like you talk about atmosphere.
There's
like
the bit in that movie that really gets me is when the army save them and they're in that kind of
yeah.
And then they're obviously going to do stuff to the younger girl, and to the two girls. They're going to obviously do stuff to them, and you're like, oh wow, this is so disturbing. Because you're like, what are they going to be able to do?
Exactly, and it plays into the helplessness. Like, I mean, even, like at least with a zombie, like you can't really hold it against them, But humanity is this bad,
Yeah, it's the evil of humanity. Like, it's like the world has literally gone to hell. There's zombies everywhere, and instead of coming together, they're going to go and do horrible things to these girls, And you're like, that's what that was in the Dead Rising games as well, where the biggest threat was not just the zombies; it was the psychopaths who are off trying to kill everybody. It was crazy. So yeah, man, that was it's a really good pick.
It's definitely one of my favorites, and I love the little. I know I'm dwelling on this a bit much, but I love the little details in it too. Like from the things like they've run out of water to like they were able to just go into a supermarket and do all the shopping, or the fact that there's like animals all over the place. Like or like the army guys are running out of supplies, like they try and make egg but it's gone off. Like you really get a sense that this is just like there wasn't a big cataclysmic event, it just like the world just kind of stopped working, and that's actually scarier than the things chasing you.
Well, that's probably more realistic as well, you know? And realism is important, because if it's something's character based, you can buy into pretty much anything, but if it's nonsense, you're like, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
And it could be anything, but once the characters behave like characters, that's your premise, But have you got a video game pick, or?
I am going. I've only actually played 2 or 3 horror games in my life. I'll give a shout out to one I quite like on Steam, which I'm not even sure you call horror, but I love Ollie Oxenfree. Have you ever played that?
I haven't.
It's one of those like kind of like made by some small independent company and then just really took off. It's a low graphic story about 5 kids who hop on a little boat and go off to an abandoned island, and you have like a little handheld radio with you, and you can open it anywhere you like, and the more you open it, the more you start hearing weird things. And then you can the radio lets you open portals to other places in time and space, and you get hints, and it's all tied up in the mystery of the main character's brother having died in mysterious circumstances. But it's also got a lot of wit to it. I wish I could send you like snapshots of the graphics. It's like it's really charming, but it lures you into this really unsettling atmosphere. Like it's just a fantastic bingeable game. You could knock it out in a few hours, and
Alright.
then it's got multiple endings as well because there's a time travel element. So
Hmm.
it's a good beginner horror. I'll put it that way. It'd be nowhere near intense as I think the ones you're talking about, but it's a
Okay.
really strange play. I'd recommend it quite highly.
Okay, I'll add it to the list then because I'm looking for stuff to play. My next two picks, and look, we have 15 minutes left in the show, so we'll do a few more and then we'll wrap
Jesus.
it up. Yeah, I know we're going through it, but okay. So my next pick are kind of two, right? They're
Okay.
they're two because I can't decide between them both, but they are some of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah.
Hammer horror movies are amazing. I'm actually going to dig out my interview with the guy who did the Hammer horror archive. I'll pop it on the feed because I got to interview him when I was working for the Sun, man, and that was great, you know.
Wow.
But yeah, to talk to a Hammer horror, the archivist of that was great. So I love Hammer movies, right? So I know there's no Hammer horror. They're a UK based horror franchise basically, and they made a bunch of movies in the 70s, 80s, and they stopped for a while. Now they're making them again. But basically,
well, they kind of created the color palette for horror, didn't they? Those sensational reds and greens and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so they did like, you know, Frankenstein. Basically, over in the States there was the Universal monsters, right?
Yeah.
And in Europe and in the UK it was Hammer, right?
Right.
So basically, and they are kind of different, very, very different. Personally, I don't really like the Universal movies. I prefer the Hammer movies. But that's just my taste. You know, so you had Dracula, the Mummy, all that kind of stuff. But not only that, they started doing other stuff. So if I really like Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, like a huge Christopher Lee fan, right?
Well, they're the two kind of big faces, weren't they? Yeah.
Basically, they just made a rake of movies with these guys just changing costumes. They like most of the sets are the same place, to the same house, right? But they they just bang them out. But all these movies are, well, most of them are bangers, right? They're just so good. So two of the big ones, which, you know, again, really have to see, The Devil Rides Out with Terence Fisher, Christopher Lee, and the plot of that is this nun. Basically, it's one of the only movies that Christopher Lee is a good guy in, right? So The Devil Rides Out, he's a good guy in it, and basically he shows up at his mate's house, and his mate is a satanic cult, is in a satanic cult, and he's trying to figure out what's going on, right? But it has a picture of the devil in the actual during the satanic ritual, and it's terrifying. It scares the hell out of me. And if you look at it normally, it's not really that scary, but yes, it is, right? Because there's so much industry, like, oh my God, this is so freaky, right? So that was in 1968, right? Now, in 1976, there was a movie called To the Devil, a Daughter, which is where Christopher Lee plays a priest, and it follows this nun, right? And basically, it turns out that the nun is tied up with this cult, right? And you follow them.
So is this a direct continuation of the verse?
No, they're just very similar. Like it feels kind of the same, and that's why it's kind of hard to throw between them, because I like them both the same, and I'd kind of watch them together. But this young girl, she, you know, it's her relationship with this offset of this religious group led by Christopher Lee, and you think that she's just a religious nun, and there's nothing kind of weird. But as you team up with this American cultist novelist, who's your POV character, you find out that your man actually is he's a follower of Astaroth. So it actually is like a borderline satanic society that he's leading, and he's trying to seduce her to birth the devil. And you're like, oh man, it's so freaky, because there's a bit at the end of it where they do this ritual, and you're like, what is going on?
Yeah.
You know what?
So is this like Exorcist 3, where it's not like a slasher, but it's just
there's no blood in any. Well, there's a little bit, but you know, it's not a slasher movie. All the horror is employed or shown in other ways. It's religious horror, and it's absolutely terrifying. Like the ritual scene in it, I we can't talk about because you
Yeah.
can't off the radio. But it's just so weird looking, and like around this time, nothing else was done like that. Where you're like, what is this? It's so freaky. So yeah, watch both of those movies, watch them together. Even if you're not into religious horror, that's fine. Hammer movies are great. There's loads of flicks. Countess Dracula movies, The Damned, Quatermass in the Pit, Quatermass 2. Just pick one. Buy
Oh,
one.
I didn't know the Quatermass was horror.
Yeah, well, Quatermass, they're all Hammer movies, and you can
Oh, okay.
The Gorgon is quite fun. The Satanic Rites of Dracula. Yeah, you just pick them. But for my 2 cents, my two favorite Hammer movies are To the Devil's Daughter and The Devil Rides Out. Fantastic flicks.
Well, since before you move on, though, since you mentioned those were like late 60s, early 70s, around the same time as The Exorcist.
Yeah.
From what you know about these movies, do you think there was a reason there was all these kind of religious fear movies popping up around that decade? Was there something like
that was like kind of the time, like the first real kind of religious movie horror movie came out was Rosemary's Baby in 1968. Yeah, 1968. So that kind of started off with the satanic panic and the increase in cultism and that in the States. So yeah, it kind of like exploded. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. That was just kind of the time period that it was. Again, like time and culture really kind of feeds into what people experience, but those themes that existed then are still very relevant today. And that's why when you watch a movie like that, you're even 50 years later, 40 years later, it's still really resonant. Like those two Hammer movies, they're scarier than anything you'll watch in cinemas because they're so, it doesn't feel like a movie.
Yeah.
It's like when you watch The Wicker Man, same thing for the original Wicker Man. Same kind of thing, it could just happen. And it's just in its banality, in its normality of day-to-day life, this stuff's happening, and then you're just like, what is this? And it's just crazy, It's not overblown, not super violent, just really, really scary.
Well, I'm really glad you said that because I've heard that The Exorcist has a documentary feel to it. And I think, obviously, you saw, for comparison, you saw It Part 2 a few weeks ago, didn't you? And there's something about horror tropes that actually release you from attention,
How do you mean?
Take It, say, which is very sensational horror. There's magic, there's demons, there's things, there's jump scares, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I find there's something very unsettling about something like one of those Hammer horror movies you described.
Yeah.
And instead of there being a jump, a monster, or this, or that, or the other, everything's just slightly off.
Yeah. That's
and
it,
it's really disconcerting.
And that's kind of what happens with some of the games we've talked about too. Like Slender, you walk into a house and it's a house, but it's really scary.
Yeah.
And it's the fact that banality of it where you're like, okay, cool. It's got to do with safety, and obviously our houses and stuff would be safe.
Yeah.
Well, we think that, right? And that's kind of,
well, you'd hope, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's what the slasher movies kind of bled into as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just kind of like that, and I think those movies that are kind of toned down, like there's a movie that came out a couple of years ago called The Last Exorcism, and that was shot as a documentary, right? And it followed the priest who he was an American, evangelical exorcist, right?
Yeah.
And he was a con man. Basically, he didn't really believe in all this kind of stuff. And he had it showed him making stuff happen in the movies. But then it turns out his last job actually was a real exorcism. She was possessed, and the family was a cultist. Spoilers. We're a satanic cult, right?
Yeah.
And it goes into him actually finding his faith. But the scares in that movie were because he didn't believe it.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh well, how can I explain this? So yeah, those kind of movies really stick with you. Another movie that I had to say, there's a movie called 1970 or 1972 called The Devils by Ken Russell. Ken Russell's great director. This movie was banned all over the place because it's so weird. It follows this convent of nuns in the 1700s. Cardinal Richelieu sends out, who was a real cardinal during in the Ancien regime in France, sends off this guy to investigate these nuns who
Mm.
are believed to be possessed. This is a real thing that happened, by the way. It was in Leon. I'm not joking. This is a real thing that happened. But the movie picks up on that, and it is so weird. It is so weird that it's great. Like there's even Google the nun scene with it, and the way it's shot, it's so freaky, so weird. Movie's fantastic. The Devils by Ken Russell. Watch it. It's so good. I love that movie. Love 70s horror, man. It's the best. Best. By the way, we do have to wrap up soon, but there's a great series by Mark Gatiss. Do you know Mark Gatiss? He wrote Doctor Who.
Oh, of course, from the League of Gentlemen and Sherlock. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And he's a big horror guy. There's a great series he did a couple of years ago on European horror and horror in general. Watch that. It's 3-part series. It's on YouTube. Mark Gatiss is awesome. I love Mark Gatiss. But yeah, you're asking me where did I find a lot of this stuff?
Yeah.
He kind of told me what to watch and where to go. So yeah, his recommendation's great. But would you believe it? Would you believe it? We've reached the hour, man.
Really?
We've reached the hour. So
holy moly, I didn't even get through half my list. That's great.
So what we can do is, and let us know, guys. nerdtoknowmedia@gmail.com. Do you want us to continue this next week, and then we can do the bad week the week after? I don't mind.
I think we should. Let's see. I'm looking forward to the bad week because I haven't seen a lot of bad horror. Right. My plan was to go on Netflix and try and find some 1-star horrors in the horror thing and to see what jumps out.
Right.
But no, I'm game for it. The only thing I want to talk about I missed out was Let the Right One In because you need to mention vampires. And that's one of my favorites. The remake, the book, and the theater show are all class.
Here's what we'll do. Here's what we'll do. We'll come back next week. We'll do 5 more each.
Yeah.
And then we'll do the bad one.
I agree in principle. I think Bryn might be too eager to get to the bad stuff.
Well,
we'll put a pin in it.
We will. We'll put a pin in it. And if we do the bad week, we'll come back and finish it off, and then.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Because this is the fastest hour in existence when we're talking on this show, guys.
I mean, get you talking about scary nuns and stuff, and the hour disappears.
Oh man, I have to say though, but any of those movies, watch them. Actually, homework for you, Ken.
Yeah.
Watch some of those movies and let me know what you think because you guys are going to be scared. Just keep the little one away because I don't want to scare her for life. But,
no, she's seen The Punisher on Netflix. She'll be grand.
Oh, geez.
Me and Stevie will be wrecked. I think she'll be fine.
Fair. I know, but I do think anyone who is kind of on the fence about what to watch this season. My goal personally is to give you guys the ultimate list of horror movies to watch. So that's what I'm trying to do. But the 70s can't go wrong. Yeah, man, it's pretty scary. But is there anything you want to plug before we get out of here for this week?
Not at all. I think that hour flew in. Just our own J-Con appearance. Is that on the 9th of November, is it? Or
Saturday the 9th of November.
9th of November, yeah.
Tickets are available now. We haven't got times for anything. But when we do, we'll pop them up on our Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm kind of working on it now. And excited now to kind of get into it. It's going to be fun. And we will be recording it as well. So we're going to try to put more stuff up on our YouTube channel, Nerd to Know Media. I'm going to start doing some game reviews as well. So we're going to pop those up. So yeah, if you're not subscribed, do. So my only plug would be nerdtoknowmedia.com. nerdtoknowmedia@gmail.com is our email, Twitter, all that stuff. Basically, you pop those 3 words in Nerd to Know Media and you're good to go. So
yeah, and we love hearing from you, and it may end up in the show on the 9th. Who knows? Or even next week.
Yeah, well, that's it. So for everybody, including Bryn, who never showed up, boo, Bryn. We'll talk to you next week, guys. Thanks so much.
Take care.